Starting with sebaceous cyst. Okay, sebaceous cyst, as its name implies, a cyst. Now, so let me tell you the first thing. What do you mean by cyst? Cyst is a fluid-filled cavity with a thin coverings, which is containing some form of fluid, which could be cellulose, it could be full of pultaceous materials or anything. So it is a cyst, sebaceous cyst. But the thing is, this is a misnomer. That means it does not contain anything like sebum. Rather, it is full of certain cheesy materials, pultaceous materials, which is full of keratin and secretin. Now, how does a sebaceous cyst form? It actually it is a form of retention cyst, where the opening of the duct, which is somehow connected to the hair follicle, and if the hair follicle is somehow gets blocked, the secretions from that different secreting containing glands somehow gets contained with its coverings of, and that's how it is sebaceous cyst is formed. The another name of sebaceous cyst is epidermoid cyst. It is called so because it is present in the junctional area between the epidermis and the dermis, because most of the part of the cyst basically is in the dermis, while there is a thin layer of epidermis which is covering the cyst, and this cyst is lined by a epidermoid layer of mucosal cells. So that is why it is called epidermoid cyst. Now, commonly the usual presentation is a cyst. Patient comes to you with a cyst, maybe that may be present over the face, over the back. In fact, it is a sort of can be available anywhere in the body except in palms and soles, where the skin is very tensed and very thick, very broad, where it is unlikely to have a sebaceous cyst in the palms and soles. Now, usually on clinical examination, the cyst is found to be can be mobile in either directions. But the most important thing is when you try to pinch the skin over the sebaceous cyst, you cannot, because it is fixed to the skin. A thin layer of epidermis is there, as I have already mentioned. So, and more importantly, the color of the sebaceous cyst is more or less that it's those of the back part of the skin, but there is some bluish tinge in some point of the cyst. That is because of the presence of punctum, and that is very important to diagnose a cyst to be a sebaceous cyst. That is the presence of punctum, and definitely the another point is that is fixity of the skin. Now, what should be done with the sebaceous cyst? That is a very general question from the patient. That is, what should we do with this? Commonly, sebaceous is nothing emergency. Only it can you can advise surgery, which is the only form of treatment. That is one for cosmetic reasons. Say the sebaceous is present over the face, commonly it is seen in the inner or outer canthus of the eye or over the forehead. Somehow it is something causing some cosmetic problem to the patient, then you can advise surgery. Another thing is sometimes when it gets infected. It causes problem, it causes pain. So to prevent complications, you may advise surgery. So surgery is the only treatment. Now, what are the complications? As I have already mentioned, and one complication is, in fact, commonest complication is infection. When patient comes to you, there is very typical history. You can make it very important to know. That is, patient will come to you an inflammatory swelling, a painful swelling, which has been gradually increasing in size with increasing tenderness and pain. And on examination, there is redness over the swelling, and which is almost just a abscess or a purulent collection cyst may present with. But the pinching point is, if you ask for history, is there any cyst or any swelling there already before this pain and swelling, increase in swelling occurs? Patient will say yes, there has been some swelling there, but it was small and it was not tender, it was not painful, it was just like that. It has been there for many years, and suddenly the swellings got increased in size, became painful and tender. So that is a typical diagnostic point of infected sebaceous cyst. So in your examination, sometimes in your say in any semester examination or in previous examination, in short case, you can be given a short sebaceous cyst, which is uncomplicated sebaceous cyst. Another one is an infected sebaceous cyst. রাহুল, আমি একটু পরে কথা বলবো, আমি একটু ক্লাস নিচ্ছি। Thank you. So coming back to what we are discussing, that is infected sebaceous cyst. It have the differential diagnosis is abscess. Just like there will be all the signs of inflammation like heat, that is it will be warm, there will be redness, and there will be tenderness. So how do you differentiate a infected sebaceous cyst from an abscess? That is very important. That is by the history. The history will tell you that there has already been a cyst that is smaller than what the patient is presenting with, and which was initially non-tender, and there was otherwise no complaint. But it suddenly the size increased, and pain and tenderness and all things suddenly cropping up. So, and what is the treatment of infected sebaceous cyst? Okay, listen to this. This is very important. Infected sebaceous cyst is commonly treated by conservative mode of treatment. That is course of antibiotic, which is commonly directed towards gram-positive bacteria like Streptococcus or Staphylococcus, like any combinations like cephalosporin or any combination like coamoxiclav, that is coamoxiclav. And painkiller you can advise, and that one is some hot fomentation, that is application of heat. And in normal courses, the swelling gets resolved in a course after a course of antibiotic, and sometimes it may get rupture with the expressions of all the infected materials, that is infected foul-smelling material, and after that the swelling gets resolved. And that is the normal course of an infected sebaceous cyst, which is duly attended. Otherwise, when the swelling gets very much changed, very much increase in size, even after application of heat and course of antibiotic, it does not get resolved. Patient will get very much restless with all the symptoms. In that case, you might need to advise a incision and drainage, just like what you advise in an abscess. That is incision and drainage. So the treatment of infectious sebaceous cyst first is conservative. If it fails, that is, if it does not get resolved after a course of antibiotic, analgesics, and hot fomentations, and then you may need to advise incision and drainage. That means you have to express out all the infected materials from the cyst, and the swelling will get smaller. But in case of abscess, only a simple abscess, it is the only treatment and that will solve the problem. But in case of sebaceous cyst, it is not so, because the cyst wall is there, still there. What you did by incising, that is, you expressing out the content. So the cyst will again reform after the infections will be over and the emergency is over after say after 3 or 4 weeks. This cyst will reform again. And again, the swelling will be there. In that case, you need to advise the patient that after all the signs of inflammation will be gone, you need to remove the cyst. That is surgery, and that is very important, only because otherwise, if there is a delay in definitive surgery, that cyst it may again get infected. So this will go on and on. You get my point? Now, I think that is okay. That is all about sebaceous cyst. If you have any questions. Okay, another thing before you organize yourself regarding asking anything, another in your standard book, that is multiple sebaceous scrotum. That is the multiple cyst encompassing whole of the scrotum, both right or left side. In that case, it is very easy to diagnose the case. That is multiple whitish elevated skin nodules that is encompassing the whole of the scrotal skin. Otherwise, there is no symptoms, but sometimes patient comes to you for the cosmetic problem. In that case, the treatment is very much individualized. That means that is according to the distribution of the sebaceous cyst, you need to do the surgery. Because suppose all the multiple sebaceous scrotum is localized on the one side of the scrotum, in that case, it is easier to remove the skin bearing all the cysts, and then again you do that. You can close the skin without causing much damage or say compromise to the skin cover or the covering of the testes. But sometimes the cyst may encompass whole of the scrotum on either side. In that case, you need to counsel the patient that even after removing all the sebaceous cyst and removing the skin bearing the cyst, sometimes the skin grafting may be required. But it may be required. But most importantly, thing is the capacity of the scrotal skin is very much. It is seen even after removing most of the skin bearing the sebaceous cyst. It is very easy to cover the testes without any need for harboring any skin from any elsewhere from the bottom. So that is multiple sebaceous cyst scrotum. Now, if you don't have any question in between, I can shift to dermoid cyst. Dermoid cyst, as its name implies, it is another cyst, but what is separate from the sebaceous cyst because of its predilection to the sides, that is embryological fusion lines. As its name implies, dermoid cyst, it represents all the representative of the three embryological layers. That is endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. I think there is some question. Is there any question? Which one? Let's see. Okay, unfortunately, I could not get the message. Whatever I am shifting to dermoid cyst, it's just like another cyst in the body, normally found in the fusion line, embryological fusion line, very commonly seen over the face, usually in the forehead or at the. How do you need to approach these short cases? Okay. Saif Rahman Khan asked me, how do you need to approach these short cases? Okay. First thing is, very importantly, whenever you will be given any cyst, any swelling in the body, you will be asked to describe the swelling. So that is very important. And describe the swelling means, first you have to mention the number of swelling. Second, you need to mention the location of the swelling. Third, you need to describe of course in that order, but preferably in this order, the shape of the swelling and the location of the swelling, and then the other pictures like how does it look like, whether it is of skin, whether the skin is okay or not, whether the shape and size and other, in general with all the swelling, there is a margin and the skin over the swelling, and whether it is fixed to the skin, that is how you can describe. Suppose there is a swelling in the back of the nape of the neck, fine. So in that case, you will see first you have to take some time to examine the patient, and you have to ask the patient relevant questions, because you won't be given much time. Only you need to ask very relevant question. In case of any swelling in the back of the neck of the back of the neck, then you can see it could be a lipoma, it could be a Dermot cyst, it could be a sebaceous cyst. So suppose this is a lipoma, and lipoma just like, so you can mention there is one solitary globular, or it could be a pyriform shaped swelling over that is situated on the back of the neck where the skin appears to be, if it is tense or if it is not so, skin is naturally normal, and on examination there is the margin is moving, that is slippage sign. I will be going into that. That is how you can describe. So, and on you can go for all the minimal examination like the measurement and the fluctuation test, the whether it is tender or not, whether it is whether there is stance illumination or not. By seeing everything, then you can reach a diagnosis, and you have to justify your diagnosis. You will be asked about this. Okay. Now, then going to the Dermot cyst, as I have already told you, that is the Dermot cyst commonly found at the fusion lines. So commonly in faces, it may be seen in that is at the outer canthus of right or left eye. It may be seen in front of the ear, that is a pre-oral Dermot cyst, or it may be back of the ear, that is post-oral Dermot cyst, and also it may be seen in the scalp, that is over the ear, it may be in the midline or anywhere over the scalp. So Dermot cyst it's a compressible swelling. It's a compressible swelling. So, and there is dimpling sign. If you press your thumb over this, there is some dimpling. There is some dimpling, and it will persist for a few seconds. And then again, it will revert back to its normal shape. And that is because of its content, which is very much with a little bit of fluid, and mostly it is thick, and which is compressible enough. The most important thing about the Dermot cyst is the skin is not fixed. So differentiating point from the Dermot cyst is differentiating point from the sebaceous cyst is the skin fixing. Sebaceous cyst, skin is fixed, while it is not so in case of Dermot cyst. And definitely, and it is in the fusion line. So if you dip your fingers, the palpating fingers, you may see sometimes there is certain erosions or of the scalp bone, and that is because of the that is component continued of the Dermot cyst. That is, you may see certain defect in the bone, which is very much evident when you do certain investigation like X-ray of the skull or even CT scan. It will be easier to demonstrate. Again, the treatment is very much surgery, especially if the patient wants so, because there is no emergency, and complication in comparison to cirrhosis is not much. But again, cosmesis is very important, and in that case, you will go for surgery. And all sebaceous cysts, lipoma, and all the small swellings, suppose it is within 5 centimeter in the longest diameter, that can be very much manageable by local anesthesia. In all these cases, in sebaceous cysts, Dermot cysts, and lipoma, it can be done by enucleations or excisions under local anesthesia. Now, then I think I can shift to the next cyst, that is lipoma. Okay, somebody has asked me about the why bone erosions are found. As I have already mentioned, that is it is a Dermot cyst, but that is that is the components from the both endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. That is bone. That is a component of mesoderm. Sometimes this cyst when it is formed, and because of the growth and expansion of the cyst, the bone is eroded. And that is why you may found on palpation, and which is also evident in the investigation that is in the bone erosion. That is gives way and then gives way to the growing dermal cyst. Okay. How do we clinically see the bony indentation in a case of dermal cyst? Very easy. Just you have to palpate the cyst and you have to dip your finger. So, and you have to tease your finger so that you will appreciate it. Otherwise, the bone will be intact. But in case of erosions, it is very easy to feel it. So, this is a more a tactile feeling. Thank you. So, going back to lipoma. Lipoma, as its name implies, it is a cyst that is arising from the full of that is adipose tissue. It's a benign tumor of the adipose tissue. Sometimes there is fibrolipoma, where along with the adipose tissue, there is a component of fibrous tissue. So commonly lipoma, it is a soft cystic swelling commonly presented by the patient as just a cosmetic swelling present everywhere, anywhere in the body. That is why it is commonly called a universal tumor, because it can be found in the skin, and also it can be subcutaneous, it can be subfacial, it can be intramuscular, even in the brain it is commonly found, and also in intra-abdominally or retroperitoneally, or even in the organs, even any accumulation of benign adipose tissue tumor like neoplastic growth is called lipoma. Now, it is called universal, and at the same time, it is also called ubiquitous tumor. Ubiquitous tumor, universal only because it is universally found anywhere in the body. It is called ubiquitous tumor because it can mimic any other pathology, It can mimic any pathology, giving a erroneous diagnosis. Suppose if the lipoma is in front of the neck, that is occupying and taking a shape of butterfly, that is because of the growth and at the same time fascial attachments, it may give a erroneous diagnosis of thyroid swelling. But on surgery, it is found that sometimes it very commonly seen, it's found out to be a case of lipoma. Also, if it is a swelling in the muscle, and it may give a apparent swelling in the inferior extremity, and it may give a erroneous diagnosis of any myoma, any rhabdomyoma, or any tumor coming off the muscle, but only on surgery or some investigation like MRI will give a clear idea of its origin. So, lipoma is a ubiquitous and universal tumor. It is soft cystic swelling, and most important thing is about its age, which is called, if you press over one side of the swelling, the margin of the swelling will move. That is called sleep sign. That is a diagnostic point of lipoma. Another thing, it has got a sort of pseudo fluctuation. So if you press over the one point of the swelling, the content of the swelling will move towards opposite side, but the skin does not get tensed, which is apparent in other cases like any tense swelling, where the fluctuation is positive. But in this case, only because the swelling gets somehow increased inside and pressing on the radially opposite side, there is so this gives a sort of pseudo fluctuation. So pseudo fluctuation is positive in lipoma. So that is, I think, with lipoma can be seen. It can be according to the location. It could be subfacial, it could be subcutaneous, it could be intramuscular, it could be intraperitoneal, and even in the brain, and it can be seen in a larger organ in the body. And the treatment is again the surgery. What you can say, the surgery is enucleations. And in this regard, I think I should give you certainly a small idea about this benign surgery like excision, enucleation, and you need to know what is excision and what is enucleation. The enucleation means it is usually removing the cyst in mass, including the coverings, without removing or damaging any normal tissue around it. While excision is taking the cyst in mass along with some bit of normal tissue around it. Okay, so this is excision or enucleation. Now, what are the findings of fluctuation and transillumination? I think I have already answered it. Fluctuation, that is not a true fluctuation. In a true fluctuation, what happens when you press over a fluid cavity, there is the skin or the coverings will get tense, that is perpendicular to the point of pressure. Perpendicular to the point of pressure, which does not happen in case of lipoma. So that is why it is called sleeve fluctuation. And transillumination, yes, in a small swelling like lipoma, transillumination is negative, but in a large swelling, without any fibrous component, you may get transillumination positive. Fine. Fine. Now, I think I can go back, shift to another short case. It is, it could be a thyroglossal cyst. What is thyroglossal cyst? Usually, it is a cyst in front of the neck. Commonly, there are different swelling presented in the front of the neck, that is in the median plane and also on the lateral plane. But the thyroglossal cyst is commonly present in the median plane. And what are the common presentation? The patient will come to you with a swelling in the median, the front of the neck, which may be cystic, which means non-tender, and size of different size, usually, and globular in shape. But when patient will be asked to protrude his tongue, the swelling will be pulled up. That is because of its origin from the thyroglossal and thyroid diverticulum. Now, what is for thyroglossal cyst? You need to know about the development of the thyroid gland. Okay, so what is thyroid development of thyroid gland? The thyroid gland develops from the median thyroid diverticulum, which is taken from originating from the endoderm between the first and second branchial arch. So it is a diverticulum starting from the base of the tongue, and it will go down between in front of between the genioglossus muscles, then in front of the neck, in front of the thyroid cartilage and the cricoid cartilage, and up to the level of 3rd or 4th tracheal ring, it will get diverticulated to create two lateral diverticulum, from where after outpouching, the thyroid gland develops, and of course, as you know, there's the follicular, the parafollicular cells will come from the origin from the another source. Now, coming back to the origin of thyroglossal cyst, that is this thyroglossal, this median thyroid diverticulum, that one with the development, the upper part gets dissolved, and only the lower part, that is the thyroid, the lateral thyroid diverticulum, will remain as a thyroid gland. But if the median part of the median thyroid gland it stays there and enlarged in size, and it gives a thyroglossal cyst. So thyroglossal cyst usually it is apparent from it is a congenital swelling, but not all the time apparent since birth. But the patient may give history there is a presence of swelling in front of the neck since birth, but suddenly is increasing in size. So, what are the what are the different types of thyroglossal cyst? Thyroglossal cyst is according to the position. It could be in relation to the hyoid. It could be suprahyoid, it is subhyoid, or it is a hyoid. So, if it is suprahyoid, that is the position will be over the hyoid bone, and it is in subhyoid, which is the commonest type. While at the level of thyroid cartilage prominence, the swelling is either on the right side or on the left side. Normally, it is found on the left side. Now, what are the complication of the thyroglossal cyst? Complication of thyroglossal cyst, sometimes it gets infected. And with just like infected CVC, it gives an appearance of tender swelling in front of the neck with a history of presence of swelling long before without any changes, and suddenly it gets pains, it gets inflamed, it gets red, it gets painful, it gets tender, and that's how a patient comes to you. And that is a very important differential diagnosis. One is infected thyroglossal cyst, another is subhyoid bursitis. In same case, the patient will complain of pain. It can be lymphadenitis. Usually, the lymph nodes are not in the midline, on either side of the midline, but they get matted, they get inflamed, and they get some matted lymph nodes. They give appearance of a swelling in the midline of the swelling, and that is how a lymphadenitis could be a differential diagnosis. And when the thyroglossal cyst ruptures, it gives a origin to thyroglossal fistula. So in that case, patient will come to you a disturbing sinus with a history or very much demonstrable discharge, purulent discharge from a long before. So this is very important. Thyroglossal cyst is a congenital swelling, while thyroglossal fistula is always it is an acquired phenomena, either after completion of thyroglossal cyst or after surgery. After surgery of thyroglossal cyst, which is definitely to the thyroglossal cyst, sometimes there is because of the retention of certain component or because of the secondary infections, there will be a fistula, and that is how a thyroglossal fistula develops. So what is the treatment of thyroglossal cyst? That is the operations called excision or enucleations of the thyroglossal cyst, which is goes by the name cyst-up operation. I think that is all about thyroglossal cyst. Then, in regards to the swelling, like CVC cyst, dermoid cyst, lipoma, patients sometimes, which is very commonly found, and we sometimes see in our outward. This patient will come to you with a history or presence of swelling all around the body. Okay, say, and mostly they are subcutaneous swelling in the trunk, in the extremities like arm, or in the back. On examination, this swelling found to be subcutaneous swelling, non-tender swellings. The swelling may be not so large, ranging from 1 centimeter to 3 to 4 centimeter in diameter. All are non-tender, but sometimes patient may complain of tenderness or pain. That is how a patient comes to our group. So these are the one presentation of multiple swelling around the body. So there are different, lots of differential diagnoses. Very common diagnosis is, one is neurofibroma. Fibromatosis, in fact. One swelling that is arising from the Schwann cell, which is called neurofibroma. And when it is multiple number, it is called neurofibromatosis. Another is if the lipoma, just like I described before, they have numerous lipoma all around the body, it could be lipomatosis. Another is subcutaneous swelling, that is fibromyalgia, which is also available in this component. Now, and the third is generalized lymphadenopathy. Of course, in generalized lymphadenopathy, the swelling will be very commonly from the known lymph node group. That is in the cervical lymph nodes, that is in the axillary lymph nodes, that is in the groin or in the elbow. This is called generalized lymphadenopathy. But what is generalized lymphadenopathy? I think I could not ask you, so I have to tell you. That is generalized lymphadenopathy that is involvement of the enlargement of the swelling of more than 2 to 3 groups of lymph nodes which are non-contiguous. Non-contiguous. That means if there is lymph nodal swelling of the axilla and cervical lymph nodes, those are contiguous. That is in proximity. So they cannot be called a part of generalized lymphadenopathy. While the cervical lymph nodes is enlarged, while the mesenteric lymph nodes is enlarged, and at the same time the groin lymph nodes are enlarged. So totally disconnected groups of lymph nodes, non-contiguous, if involved and if enlarged, then it is called generalized lymphadenopathy. So if a patient comes to you with a different swelling, multiple swelling, you may always think of fibromatosis, lipomatosis, neurofibromatosis, and generalized lymphadenopathy. But now you may be asked what are the different causes of generalized lymphadenopathy. So it is all the lymphoproliferative disorder could be one of the causes, like Hodgkin's lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but more commonly it is non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and it could be tuberculosis. So first, then in that case, you need to ask all the relevant questions in regards to non-Hodgkin lymphoma and Hodgkin lymphoma. While Hodgkin lymphoma, where the lymph nodes are more commonly, there is a predilection for cervical group of lymph nodes and axillary group of lymph nodes, where the lymph nodes are enlarged, which is non-tender, but it is said to be tender on alcohol intake. I don't know, I never had a positive hearts. We have written it in the book, but I don't know, you don't get to see all those cases. While non-Hodgkin lymphoma, the patient may present with a history of weight loss, that is B symptoms, with a complaint of fever with chill and rigor, night sweats. And third one is bone pain. That is also important. Bone pain is very common. There is weight loss, that is history of fever, night sweats, and weight loss. And also in non-Hodgkin lymphoma, it may involve any part of the body, commonly, but involvement of a certain group of lymph nodes, the diagnosis, sometimes it clinches the diagnosis, that is like involvement of Walder ring, involvement of the retrovagal lymph nodes, the non-Hodgkin lymphoma, involvement of the mesenteric lymph nodes, which is very common in non-Hodgkin lymphoma. I am not going into that detail. So any swelling generalized in the body, you need to think of all the possible differential diagnoses in the back of your mind. Now, I may go to another differential short case, that is undescended testis. Okay, undescended testis. So, as its name implies, what is undescended testis? The better term is, more medical term is cryptorchidism. Cryptorchidism. Then it could be, in general, cryptorchidism means that is absence of testis in the scrotum. Usually, generally, it is there is also a term called monoarchism. But in general, cryptorchidism means that the absence of testing in the scrotum, usually it could be unilateral or bilateral. Now, what are the different causes of infertility? That is because of the developmental anomaly of the testis. In that case, you need to know the development of the testis or the descent of the testis, how the testis descends from it originated in the mesothelia and then it descends down at the 6 months of the internatal life. Around 24 to 5 weeks, it enters into the anterior abdominal wall through the deep ring, developing inguinal canal, and that is pulled down by a structure called gubernaculum. Gubernaculum. This is a fibrofatty tissues, and there is a contraction of the gubernaculum, and this descent occurs with the under the control of, that is, the sex hormones, the testosterone, and with this, then the gubernaculum, which has got different parts, the testis is pulled down at the end of the development of the internatal life, that is, in the bottom of the scrotum, and sometimes the complete descent occurs only after birth, maybe it takes 1 year of postnatal life. So, undescended testis, it is always should be diagnosed after 1 year. After 1 year, it is very important. So, what are the diagnostic points of undescended testis? Is male baby presenting with this absence of testis in the baby when the mother is commonly আমি এখন ক্লাস নিচ্ছি, একটু পরে ফোন করবেন, একাডেমিক বিল্ডিং আছে। So patient's mother will tell that suddenly she discovers that his testis is not there. Sometimes patient may even patient's mother may even say there is swelling in the groin. Now that is how patient will be brought to you, and you will look for the testis and the development of scrotum was complete or not. That is very important. Only in a undescended testis, the scrotum is not expected to develop completely. So there will be absence or partial development of the scrotum on that side. That is undescended testis. Now, there are the different types of হ্যালো, একটু পরে ফোন করো, আমি একটু ক্লাস নিচ্ছি, 1 ঘন্টা পরে, 8 ঘন্টা পরে ফোন করো, ফোন করলে ধরে নিয়ে যে ক্লাস নিচ্ছি। Now, whenever you don't find testis in the scrotum, there are the differential diagnosis. One is very classical undescended testis in cryptorganism. Another is ectopic testis. What is ectopic testis? What is ectopic testis? That means the testis has crossed the inguinal canal. Then we, instead of going down to the scrotal sac, it has gone aberrant. So it is placed in some ectopic positions like superficial inguinal space, maybe in the perineum, or even on the opposite side of the scrotum or in the femoral ring. There are the common site of ectopic testis. So difference between the undescended testis and the ectopic testis, that is one thing is for sure in case of the ectopic testis, that is testis has gone down, has traversed the whole length of inguinal canal, but it has not gone down to testis, bottom of the testis. But in case of undescended testis, this descent may be interrupted at any point of the course of testicular descent. It may be found in the retroperitoneum, that is only after investigation. It may be found in the inguinal canal, in the proximal part, in the middle part, or maybe at the superficial inguinal ring. which can be appreciated if the patient is very meant to come. In that case, you may look for ectopic undescended testes. In this case, there is very important question or demonstration of examination you will be asked in a baby, in a male baby of pediatric age group, where the patient is restless, when patient is not cooperative, at the same time patient is very tensed. How to examine a patient's scrotum or genitalia in a male baby? Most importantly, inspection is very important. Inspection. In that case, you have to ask the mother to calm down the baby, and sometimes you have to ask the baby to hold the baby from the back. It is called dangling method. Dangling method. It is I cannot demonstrate you. Dangling method means that is you have to sort of dangle the baby while mother is holding back with the arm around the waist from behind. In that case, it will increase the intra-abdominal pressure, and in case if there is a hernia, there is a congenital hernia or hydrocele, that will get prominent, which is otherwise may be prominent while the patient was with mother, he was crying, and the swelling gets prominent. But when the mother brings the patient to the doctor, which is not easy to demonstrate, in that case, you have to inspect. Why not touch the patient? Why not touch the patient? First, even in general patient, especially in the pediatric age of group, you need to warm your hands. You need to warm your hands. Otherwise, especially the baby in the cool hand, if you place your cold hand over the thigh, that will stimulate the cremasteric reflex. That will stimulate the cremasteric reflex. Even if the testis is there, it will pull up into the canal. So you won't find the testes, and you will get a spurious diagnosis of undescended testes. So that is very important. The next question you will be asked, if already the cremasteric reflex has already been stimulated because of the clinician was not very conscious about the cremasteric reflex, how to revert back the testis into the normal position? In that case, which is not all the time very easy to do, is you have to ask the patient to sit with knees folded. যেটাকে আমরা বাংলায় বলি বাবু হয়ে বসা. That is, with patient will have to sit over the chair with flexion at the hip and full flexion at the knee. In that case, the cremasteric reflex will be again nullified, and the testes will go down, and then again with warm hands, with reassurance, you may demonstrate whether the testis is there, or whether there is hernia, whether there is a hydrocele or so. Another entity is retractile testis. Retractile testis is just like that, because of the overreactive baby or because of the fear just I mentioned, testis is pulled up into the inguinal canal and testis cannot be found. But after patient gets pulled, or in normal condition, testis may again be found. So that is called retractile testis. In that case, the scrotum is expected to be developed. So only in the undescended testis, scrotum is either partially or completely totally absent. But in ectopic testis or in retractile testis, that side of the scrotum is expected to be developed. Okay, now the question will be, what are the different complications of undescended testis? One is definitely that is psychological thing, especially in the school boy. That is, patient, they get to compare with another student of their same class, and somehow he gets an idea there is something wrong with him, so that may give a psychological problem. Second is very common, that is testicular torsion. Testicular torsion. In undescended testis, sometimes patient will come with a swelling and with tender swelling at the groin, and on further examination you will find the testis is not there on the ipsilateral side, and that is testicular torsion. Undescended testis is one I forgot to mention, that is more common on the right side. I could ask you why it is on the right side, but I think I cannot get it, so I have to tell you again. That is why it is common on the right side, because the descent of the testis, which is seen in a right-handed person, the testis comes down faster on the opposite side, that is non-dominant side. If in a right-handed person, the left-sided testis has reached the bottom faster than the right side. That is why the undescended testis is more common on the right side. That is why inguinal hernia is more common on the right side. Because the patency of the processus vaginalis has been there for longer period on the right side, making the patient more susceptible to develop hernia on the right side. Okay, now how do you diagnose a case of undescended testis? That is by the absence of testis in the scrotum, and sometimes demonstration of some testis like swelling, firm swelling, non-tender swelling in the groin. And if that is not so, you need to go for certain investigation. What are the basic investigation you may ask for? The basic investigation imaging, which is commonly ultrasonography, but sometimes ultrasonography cannot demonstrate the swelling. The next line of investigation is either CT scan or MRI. CT scan or MRI, especially when one needs to go for the surgical intervention. One decides to go for surgery. The location of the undescended testis is very important. Now, what are the treatment of undescended testis? Treatment of undescended testis is, if the testis is manageable, it can be brought down into the bottom of the scrotum or as much as possible, which is called orchidopexy or orchiopexy. Orchidopexy or orchiopexy. So it is a surgery of bringing the testis down into either at the root of the scrotum or at the bottom of the scrotum, if that is possible. In that case, what we do, we release all the adhesions like gubernaculum and certain structures that will pull the testis up, and after lengthening of the structure without compromising the testicular vascularity, testis is brought down. Sometimes, if it is not possible to bring the testis into the scrotum, we may create a subdermal pouch, that is in the subdermal pouch, and we place the testis. Sometimes the surgery is a two-third surgery, not done in one sitting, but more than one sitting may be required to bring the testis totally down to the scrotum. First, we place it somewhere in between, and then in the second sitting, it is completely after certain development of the testis, further release of the adhesions, it may be possible to bring the testis down to the bottom of the scrotum. So that is, I forgot to mention, sorry, I was in the discussion about the complications. So one was psychological stress, another is testicular torsion, and another is, very importantly, that is malignancy. See, definitely a testis of a undescended testis is definitely more susceptible to develop testicular malignancy from a normal person whose testes are normally descended. But it is found still that is the possibility of malignancy in undescended testes is overrated. It was previously thought there is a chance of 35 to 40% more chance of developing malignancy. It is not so. Still, it is thought that there is a chance of 10 to 15 to 20% of the chance of undescended testes to convert to undergo malignant conversion. More commonly to seminoma. Seminoma is the commonest malignant conversion from a undescended testis. And another interesting thing, it is also in a undescended testis on the right side or the left side, the opposite side, that is on the normally descended testis, is also susceptible to undergo malignant conversion. That is very important. So, it is very important to examine the patient in some frequently in a monthly or yearly basis. So, any change in the structure or the nature of the swelling should be dealt with emergency. There is no point of leaving the testis there to making it more, making it at the risk of developing malignancy. Now, what is the another complication? Infertility. Infertility is very common, especially in a bilaterally undescended testis, and that is because of the changes that the testis, undescended testis may undergo after a certain period of time. It is seen the changes may start right from after 1 year of being in the very wrong position. As we know, there is certain changes in the temperature in the scrotum and in the abdominal wall. That is around 40 degrees centigrade difference. So testis, when it remains in anywhere in the retroperitoneum or in the inguinal canal, that there is changes and it may start undergoing certain fibrous changes, and it is always better to do surgery as early as possible. The ideal time of surgery is 1.5 months. 1.5 months. So that is if the testis is possible to bring it is possible to bring down the testis, the functional dysfunction of the testis can be arrested at that moment. So that is I think all with the undescended testis. Anything, any short case? Another is, yes, basal cell carcinoma. There is very two common skin cancers that may present to you, that may be presented to outdoor, and in examination you can be given cases like basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. So, basal cell carcinoma. What is basal cell carcinoma? It is the commonest skin cancer. It is the commonest skin cancer, commonly found in the face, commonly in the forehead and also in the nasolabial fold. Commonly it is called teardrop cancer. That is because it is known commonly comes and takes origin from the subcutaneous tissue, that is from the skin, usually from the area of the face, which is usually get wet by the tears. That is called teardrop cancers. Now, what are the common presentation of basal cell carcinoma? Sometimes basal cell carcinoma may present just like the elevation over the skin with certain depigmentations and a vascularity seen just underneath the skin. But sometimes it may also present with a blackish discolorations with central hypopigmentation, So it is also called a serpiginous tumor. That is a very curvy blackening line with a sometimes very soon it will develop ulcerations in the center. So that is one very common presentation with the ulcer with the skin color changes around the margin of the ulcer. And finally, the ulcerative presence. And that is commonly it's called serpiginous ulcer. But the ulcer is there is may be presented in the face. The diagnosis is commonly done by incisional biopsy. Basal cell carcinoma is a locally malignant cell, so it's not likely to develop metastasis. So the common treatment is excision. Of course, the deep cut normal tissue along with the normal tissue all around has to be removed. And from the pathological aspect, there are different types like nodular, micronodular, superficial basal cell carcinoma. Another is squamous cell carcinoma. That is also another skin cancer, second commonest skin cancer. Squamous cell carcinoma may develop anywhere in the body. It also may present over the scalp as a complications of any skin lesions, or also may be found in the extremities. There is with history, just like basal cell carcinoma, I forgot to mention, basal cell carcinoma commonly found in a white people. White people are more commonly susceptible. And what are the predisposing factors? There are ultraviolet radiations exposure is very important. So in a patient, commonly in a where the sun exposure is more, or the people in the job required him to be in the sun exposure, they are more susceptible to develop squamous cell carcinoma and basal cell carcinoma. And also history of irradiation. Patient who undergo irradiations and for treatment of different cancers may develop basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma in future. Commonly, in case of basal cell carcinoma, which are ulcerative presentation is more common. In case of squamous carcinoma, which is more commonly a reddish flesh growth with an unhealthy margin and very unhealthy floor, commonly seen in squamous cell carcinoma. While basal cell carcinoma is commonly found in the face, squamous cell carcinoma may be found over the scalp, in the extremities, in the leg, and as a complication of very commonly it is as a complication of chronic ulcer, as it is post-burn contract from the post-burn contracture, also from the any scar following arsenic poisoning or any unhealthy scar for previous surgery, which has been there for because of certain chronicity, it has all been there for long. This type of scar, like chronic scar with a persistent infection, maybe due to the presence of certain foreign body or so, or any post-burn contracture, or any scar or any pigmented area as a result of arsenic poisoning, this makes the patient who develop squamous cell carcinoma susceptible to develop squamous cell carcinoma. Again, in case of the difference between the basal cell carcinoma and the squamous cell carcinoma is squamous cell carcinoma is known to metastasize through lymphogenous metastasis. So, if you search for the lymph nodes, the swelling may be, there will be swelling at the common veiny lymph nodes. So, suppose there is a swelling in the arm, same arm, maybe in the arm or the forearm, it is very common to the axillary lymph node may be found enlarged. Same is in case of any extreme swelling in the limbs, inferior limbs, maybe in the leg or in the thigh, the groin limb, the inguinal lymph nodes may be found enlarged. So that is also a diagnostic one. There is lymphogenous metastasis. Now, what is the definitive surgery? Yes, surgery is a definitive treatment, but sometimes it may metastasize to lymph nodes. So in that case, sometimes chemotherapy and radiotherapy is a form of treatment, and sometimes amputation, even amputation may be needed if it is making that limb very not fit for any use, or if without compromising inadequacy, the oncological adequacy, the testing and the mass cannot be removed. In that case, the limb, the affected limb may be needed to be removed. That is amputation. So one is just excision, another is amputations, and sometimes it may be required. There may be some form of reconstruction is required according to the site of presentations. So surgery and cytotoxic therapy, either chemotherapy or radiotherapy, whereas squamous cell carcinoma is known to be radiosensitive, but basal cell carcinoma is not. In that case, so squamous cell carcinoma, surgery, radiotherapy, and sometimes chemotherapy, this may be the mode of treatment. Okay. I think it's okay for today. If you, I am waiting for your message to see if you have any questions, you can ask. Or even somebody of you can call me. I think Saurav called me, so he can call me on my number after collecting all the questions, and I can give you some answers. Hello. Hello. Bolo. Hello. Bolo. না আমার মোস্ট প্রবাবলি ডক্টর অর্থোপ্রোবোডায় মনে নেবেন, আজকে আমাকে নিতে বলেছিলেন, সেই জন্য আমি তো মানে উইদাউট এনি প্রায়র ইন্টিমেশন আমি ক্লাসটা করলাম একবার মনে, সেটাই। তোমরা শুনতে পাওনি নাকি? আচ্ছা, সে ঠিক আছে, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। ঠিক আছে, তাহলে আজকে আর এখানে ফিনিশ করছি। ওকে, ঠিক আছে, চলো একটা কিছু বলবো।